I tell you the team we should talk about now, because they're one of the ones who lost to the Mongols. It is Falcons. Because I actually feel like there's like the discussion around this team is ass maniac. Like, it's just people just either hating on them because of the Saudi shit, which is like, what's that got to do with analysis in the game? Or it's people doing those weird emotional narratives that I don't really know why they have. Like, Megas should have stayed in Vitality. And my favourite one is the one where it's like, Snappy, I bet you wish you were in now. It's like, we've explained a million times. Like, Megas had already won in Vitality and Zonic was leaving. And then Snappy staying in Ents. Like, it turns out they could have matched his salary. But I've always said this. Here's the reason why Snappy shouldn't have stayed in Ents. Because if he leaves Ents, they're never going to be as good again. And if he stays, they might be as good. But if they get their other star players signed, he's not going to be as good. So what that means is he was Ents, for fuck's sake. I've even heard he actually was the one who scouted some of those players, by the way, that he got into the team. I've even heard he's so cool when he left. He sort of told them, here's my next shortlist of people you could replace the players with. And he actually told them some of the including by the way, I think he said get Glaive instead of me. So or put all that emotional shit aside. Let's just watch them as a team. We've watched them play a bunch now. Right? Obviously, the first thing you have to say at the outset is, this is the first LAN with Dupree, guys. Like, I know people are doing that thing where they're like, but they're supposed to be a super team. Like, that narrative died the day Nico didn't sign on the dotted line. Like, they're not a super team. That's a ridiculous statement to have. What they are is the Ents core with, in theory, a slightly better player instead of Niha, but a worse player instead of Nerds. Because here's the thing, we're going to get into that part, the Dupree part, obviously. Like, I don't expect them to be a super team. I don't think people are being criminal where when they had Boros, they just delete that top four at Katowice. That just never happened, Maniac. Because they failed the RMR, we're supposed to pretend they never made top four at like one of the biggest events this year. By the way, with a worse player, in my opinion, in like the star position. So to me, I actually find Falcons an interesting team because they've got a million problems and you saw them all at Pro League. But there is something there. Like, put it this way, as much as people are calling them this terrible teammate, they're not. They're usually in all these games. Like, they could have beaten G2, but they definitely could have beaten Mongols. Like, they actually are a team that has something to them, but obviously they are missing pieces, or maybe the roster construction is a bit dodgy. Where are you at on this squad? I heard you were quite critical when you did the G2 cast, so where are you at on Falcons overall?
Well, the G2 game, honestly, aside from map 1, was really empty from Falcons. I mean, it's a 13-3 and a 13-5 losses back-to-back, so it's not like they gave us a whole lot to be excited about. And I hadn't seen the Bedboom game, which I think on paper is also very problematic, to lose 2-0 to Bedboom and never make it to double digit on any map. I think it's kind of a harder one to sort of justify if you're Falcons. So the problem that I have with Falcons is that because of this end score, like the whole super team narrative, I never really, like, I understood from the get-go when the roster didn't come together as they wanted to. I knew that this was outdated and that would never be coherent or relevant anymore. So that, for me, I don't care. I've never looked at them as a super team, and that doesn't, it isn't part of my narrative when it comes to Falcon. But the way I look at it is that because of this end score, I had expected a floor to be higher from the get-go. When you have your AWP, when you have your leader, and when you have your support in the name of Madden and entry fragger, the shadow B role, you, in theory, already have enough to protect you from the woes of creating a whole team from scratch. This, in my eyes, This is not Liquid. We're not looking at Liquid here. We're not looking at 4 or 5 different philosophies coming in together and then having to come up with a mixed bag of Counter-Strike. That's not how I look at it. Now, in interviews and all, they have made it quite clear that they wanted to find their own CS and they are not going to just do ends and all. That's fair. I personally think that what Snappy had done in ends deserved to be reproduced to an extent. Like, I would have probably based a lot of the game plan of Falcons from ends, because I think he did great. It was an international team. He was thriving in it. I understand the concept of trying to not just sort of copy-paste the playstyle of Counter-Strike, and you have to integrate some other ideas. I do get that. But unfortunately, I think on short term, that's cost them. And I think the floor is much lower than I expected. Now, obviously, let's just address the situation. I mean, Snappy individually had, I don't even know if it was his worst performance
It's got to be one of them. It was really bad.
It's probably down there. I was going to say up in here, but I guess figuratively it would be down there. And so he had a 0.77 rating individually in a day and age where leaders are notoriously having better numbers and are more efficient.
I mean, Carrigan again, just watch. He's like 1.0 rating sometimes now,
Carrigan, Apex, like the leaders that you could usually point to as being very low on the fragging output, they're all doing better. So that one, you don't need a degree to know that Snappy individually just completely missed the mark on that in this game. But that, to me, I use this as a sort of a vector to think about where the team is at. Because I always feel like when a leader is having a really hard time, not obviously part of it is on his own shoulder, and there is such a thing as an individual responsibility and an autonomy and an agency as an individual to be better, and that's granted. But I always feel like systematically it means something else is happening, that a leader is just completely lost, whether it's because he's not intuitively in line with the Counter-Strike that they want to play, or if the communications aren't flowing the way he wants to. There has to be something that currently isn't going really well in the Falcons camp. I also think, well, obviously every team that's losing isn't really smiling on the camera, but in their case, sometimes it is very, very quiet and somber in these losses, which I don't really know what that means. I'm not going to read too much into it, but it's not a feeling that is reassuring when I see them lose. The only thing I would like to point to, and it's more like an open question that I actually don't really have an opinion about it, but now that you have Dupree, Magisk, and Zonic, I throw you back to the creation of Vitality and how complicated it had been first.
I was going to link to this. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, that's the way I'm looking at it too. When Vitality brought in this trio from Astralis, it took them a really long time to figure out the Counter-Strike they wanted to play. And there was some obvious sort of locking horns happening in terms of, hey, this is how I think we should play, and this is what I need, and this is how you should talk, and this is what we should do. They took a little bit of a while. So I do not know if it is something that Snappy is going through right now, where he has, because it's not the same. It isn't, a team isn't going to work the same if you have 3 players from an X team and then 1 player from a team, another player from a different team, and a coach from a different team. Now you actually have, figuratively, you sort of have a block, like you have a core of people who are together, who I guess have updated their way of looking at Counter-Strike, but still share some characteristic on how they want to play the game. And I don't know if that's something that maybe Snappy is going to take a little bit of time to warm up to, the same way Apex needed time to actually function and be good with the Danish trio in Vitality. So is there something that is in the water for Falcons right now where Snappy isn't exactly aligned with the way his teammates want to play, the way Zonic wants to play? I wager this is something that takes a little bit of time, and I do wonder if that has a bigger impact. But again, these are purely hypotheses. I haven't talked with them. I don't have behind-the-scene access.
Of course.
But this, if you just ask me, what do you think is happening here? I would say that's probably a lead that could be investigated.
No, by the way, and that is exactly appropriate content for podcasts like this. That's literally what we're doing, is just waxing lyrical about the game and just throwing ideas out there, etc. Right? So what I'll do is I'll take a couple of those points that I want to actually go do a bit of back and forth, because even though we are actually both really good, because we're both analysts, just doing the thing where we talk for 10 minutes, like obviously sometimes you want to let the other person get in on one. So I'll just a couple of those points. So on the last one, this is where actually great minds think alike. Just give myself credit there, because I actually was going to use exactly that point. Because what I always try to do, if you notice, Maniac, is I try not to make it just like one factor. I try to think like, what are the other things essentially? Like if one thing's failing at the top of a system, what are the things below it that might be failing that can't even get to that point? Well, one of them I thought about immediately is this Sonic angle. Because notice no one ever mentions that, bro. What they do is they go, oh, what the fuck? Like, they don't have a star like Nerds anymore. Or they go, what the fuck? Snappy, fragging bad and not calling. Or like, hey, what happened to the end score? They used to be so coherent. And what they don't ever talk about anymore is Zonic. They just act like he doesn't exist. And it's like, guys, this is Zonic's project. And that is a key way to frame this, Maniac. It wasn't like they signed the team and then they said to Zonic, hey, do you need some work? Well, do you want to be a coach of this team? No. He is the one who, in theory, picked these players and scouted these players and decided he wanted to sign these players, and him and Makis wanted to reunite. He even, I'm going to guess, is the one who brought back Dupree and got him back in the... So by the way, these are massive gambles. Like that last one's a massive gamble, obviously. No one knew how that would work out. So if you consider that, I think you have to not think about this as like, it's just like Taz joining G2 and he's learning their way. It's more like Blade in Na'Vi. Because what does Blade always say, but he's been proven right, and I'll just say, I think Zonic has, and we might be about to see it a third time, which is Blade will always tell you with a new lineup, oh, my teams don't win the first event with a lineup. I mean, dude, in that interview after he won the major, he even said his goal still for the major was just top 4. He was still like trying to progressively get better tournament on tournament. And when normal coaches say the same thing, Maniac, they are full of shit. When they're like, hey, give me 6 months. It's like, bro, if you just have a normal team and you're just a normal coach, what you mean there is, don't judge me, please. I'm not going to do well. When Blade says it, I've seen him do it, guys. I have seen him take players and just build them into his system, and they just get better and better and better. And over time, they eventually become a championship team. Now, Zonic did that twice. He did that in Astralis, and he did that now with Vitality. I'll quickly make a point on the Astralis one people probably missed. Dude, Device said this in his interview at Pro League. He said a very interesting thing. Because he was trying to explain how the new Astralis still needs time to figure out how to play together and get... He pointed out that even him, Dupree and Zipnix, which were the three that went all the way back to like 2013, even they took a while to sort of learn how each other plays. Well, that's actually probably the most underrated thing about Astralis is that they had three players by the time they became the GOAT lineup in 2018 who'd been playing together for like 5 years. So even though everyone wanted to make it like, no, it's just genius at the tactics. No, that tactic becomes like 30% easier when you played with the guy for 5 years and you know when Zipnix is going to make like a correct angle. You know when Device is going to play passive. You know when Dupree's going to go aggressive. When you've all played together for that long, it's like sports. It becomes almost like telepathy because you just know the guy. In your head, you have a version of him and you know what he's going to do. And that's why it works. It's not actually that you had the best review session ever and then Zonic was like moving pieces around like a football thing. You're going to push up the wing. Like, yeah, he was doing that like as well, but all the other coaches do that as well, guys. What happens is you have an OP advantage. You have the synergy, the chemistry, right? So one, that is the factor people don't think about because those three, like you said, they took a while in Vitality to get cooking, guys. And it wasn't even just pieces. When they brought the pieces in there, they had to integrate Spinks. They had to figure out what Dupree's role was. And Magus, by the way, clearly took time to start cooking. And yeah, the whole thing took a while to get going. So first of all, I'm going to give Zonic time in that sense. Like, I don't think he's the guy where you just give him a lineup and they're just going to win the first lineup. I don't think that's plausible. I also think, like Blade, by the way, I don't know that they're a perfectionist, but they have that thing where they do want to implement high-level CS immediately, and that takes fucking time, mate. Like, I think what you saw with Astralis was, it also took them time to wind up to that level, and it's why when they changed pieces, they were never even close to the same team. It didn't matter. Remember, some of those pieces were fucking good that came in. Like, it didn't matter. You wouldn't be as good. So then, after that, the other detail I would say is this angle, which is... On the end score thing, that is the most underwhelming part of this team, mate. Because look, we could talk in a minute. I think I'll save it and we'll do it after about like stars and what should they do about fragging and stuff. But if you just look at like what the end score had, one of the things that I loved about that team, a la Heroic, was man, they were so fucking coherent. Like they really did play as a team. They clearly knew what Snappy wanted. They knew, again, they actually had that sort of synergy at the team. That isn't here right now, mate. If I had to say the worst quality of Falcons, it's not even just raw fragging, which everyone else is going to point to. We can get to that in a minute. It's actually poise. Like, bro, in that G2 game there, like, as you say, on that nuke game, you're going to be like, oh, but they just got destroyed. Mate, how many times, you remember the game, how many times in the early round would they get like a kill and be up on numbers? Or they'd get like, remember that one where Snappy, right at the end of the game, did that mad MP9 push on the stairs? He got that insane kill, and if he then just played like differently, that's like a mega winnable round. But they fucked it up and managed to let the bomb get down since it was a 2v2 with bad weapons. Like, that's the sort of thing that old Ensign Heroic never would do. That's when they would win the round, mate. That's when like team play could win you a game against better guns and better fraggers. So right now, they are ass in the late round, mate. This team, you can just bet on this team to lose clutches, mate. They do it all day long.
And the problem with that is, just to bounce back on your point as well.
No, go for it. That's my point.
They have to have, you know, you were talking about the Astralis core, and I mean the three players, the Device and Dupree, who've played for many, many years. They know each other so well. I mean, I think Madden, Senpais, and Snappy should get close to that sort of state already now.
Yeah.
They've had played together for a long time. They know each other for
it's like a year and a half or something, mate. Yeah.
Exactly. So I can imagine that. So the way I look at Counter-Strike is that when you go down to the late round, the 2v2 clutches with high intensity, I think this is where you're going to be exposed if you're not used to play with someone. Because, right, it's a moment where not everybody can just voice consciously what they're doing. There's a little bit of, no, actually not a little bit. There's a whole lot of focus that's going straight on your crosshair. There's micro decisions to be made. There's code names to be used so that you don't spam the comms. So if you tell me Snappy and Dupree don't know how to approach this 2v2 that's panicky, I would say, okay, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's going to take time. It's probably going to take them 20 clutches to play in a 2v2 so they start understanding how each other is feeling. What are the code words? What's the intonation when they're stressed? What is it? It's going to take them time, and that's fine. But a 2v2 with Snappy and Senpais should literally be just a normal day in the Ents office. Yes. That's the way I see it. There is no reason to think that they would approach this clutch differently. They've played it already 50 times. So that in itself is something that I worry a little bit about. The fact that there is a lack of coherence in some situations where a trio already know each other. They know each other. They know how that works. So that's a little bit of an issue. And I wanted to bounce back as well on the Zonic point very quickly. The way I see it, a coach's impact is never going to be short-term. Never. The only aspect where a coach can, from day one, actually do something is if they have tremendous human skills and they can, on the day of an event, maybe talk someone out of a frustrated stage, or maybe put someone in the right mindset in terms of confidence. On an individual level, I think you might be able to have a quick, short-term impact, but it's always going to take time. It is always going to take time if you want to install a system, if you want to improve and optimize training protocols, if you want to define goal for a team and have a roadmap of where you want to go. None of these things are done in a matter of weeks. The same way, I would not put failures on a coach's doorstep when they do, but I wouldn't give them credit if they won after an event either. It's a two-way street. You're not going to get my credit if you win an event after 3 weeks, but I'm not going to blame it on you if you don't. So yes, of course, it's take time. And I also think the coach leader is one of the most important symbiosis there is in Counter-Strike. And Snappy had that with Saw. There's no doubt about it. He was an ENS. He had Saw in his back. They knew each other. They perfected the system. They understood each other. Zonic is not a coach like Blade that's going to come in with just an open mind thinking, okay, so what do we do? No, he's got an idea.
Yes.
He's got an idea on how to win in Counter-Strike. He's done it a fair few times. So I do believe that the Snappy Zonic pair might take time to synchronize.
Yes.
And that's okay. That's all right. The question is, are they going to be able to withstand the losses that are going to be on the way to that path? That's, to me, that's the one question.
Yes. And also, I'll just throw this out there. I think that the thing people miss is that that's also the difference between being a championship coach who has won and has had an era or a time where your team was dominant, is you have figured out your flavor and your recipe for Counter-Strike. So the difference is, I'll use a football manager example. There are managers that just are professional, essentially they just know their job as manager and they're going to go team to team to team, depending on the results. And what they do is they have to do short-term results because they get fired after a season. What they do is it's right, this is the personnel I have. Here's a game plan that works for them. Let's just try and win matches today, basically. Let's win the match on Saturday. The difference is if you're one of the legendary coaches and you're going to get many chances and you want to build another all-time great team, you're going to do the opposite. You're going to actually be sort of a teacher. You're going to say, hey guys, you're going to learn my system. Maybe I have a defensive system. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I play super aggressive like Johan Cruyff did back. Whatever happens, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to go through play. I might even have to fire some of you who are good. I'm going to get the people who fit my system, which, by the way, I think that's what Blade's done. But I also think people just miss that it's what Zonic did because his team was just too successful. So they never saw the build-up. They just think he just walked in and everyone knew what they were doing and they just won the game. So to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content, well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.